All right, welcome everyone to another edition of the Subseasonal Forecast Contest. My name is David Margolin. Today, we're forecasting, or the most recent forecast was from January 5th, so yesterday, and it was out to the January 20th to 24th period. As per usual, we'll start with our attribution, so we'll look at the recent verification, and then we'll get into discussing the forecast. Anyone else have any agenda items they want to hit today? It seems like kind of a light crowd, so we can, I don't know, if anyone has any particular research topics or things like that, we can probably spend a little time on it.
So Mike is probably not going to be here today, but he did want me to pass a question, which is why the pattern recently ended up being so warm, even though the teleconnections seem to be favorable for colder than normal conditions.
Huh. Yeah. That's a good one. I'm going to write it down, but don't let me forget. And then I think, maybe related, or at least in the same extended family. Um, I know I've had some questions from folks about the winter as a whole and if it's responding consistent with the La Nina regime. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit if y'all think that would be okay. What do you think, Philip?
I think the La Nina is another interesting
Yeah.
thing.
Okay, cool. All right. So, we'll spend some time on that today. I think those are good topics. And so no one disagrees. So, okay. And if anyone thinks of anything else, let's talk about it. And it's funny too. If you remind me, because I had a question about that from one of my clients, and I sent Maxar a question about it, and I got a nice response actually from Bradley over here at Maxar, and so maybe we can even look at that here in a minute. All right, so let's start with the looking back at the most recent verification. I think I've got it over. I thought I had it pulled up. Yeah, this is it. So the most recent verification was from December 15th, forecast made on December 15th, verifying December 30th to January 3rd. And so the forecast verified at 133, or about 134 HDDs. As a reference, the 10-year normal was 145 and the 30-year was 153. So definitely a forecast that verified on the warmer side of things. And there's definitely a range of forecasts. On the bad side was me, near the worst side. Going kind of for a cooler kind of outcome, leaning on the MJO analog, I guess, a little bit. And then we had on the flip side, we had some of the persistence forecasts, and even the CFS on the warmer side, and of course, those forecasts verified better. And it looks like I just sorted by the performance metric here. It looks like Matt Lanza, I think he's probably had like the most top scores. I don't know this for a fact, but it just feels to me that when he's good, he's really good. Not to say that when he's bad, he's really bad. So if Matt, you're listening, I'm not saying that. But let's see. Yeah, it's interesting, the CFS here. But before we get into that, let me just pull up the map so we can also look at the map. I think that's helpful before we dive in.
While you're doing that, sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to, I noted, this was a bad forecast for the MJO analog, but I saw that Paul Roundy, who had a pretty good score, mentioned MJO statistics. So I'm wondering if, as part of this, you can click on that, read more, and see if he explains what was the difference between the MJO statistics versus the analog. Or maybe the EC47 was the main driver. I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting inconsistency.
That's a good question. So let's see. I clicked on Paul. Yeah. Building Greenland block during this time, but without much forcing for eastern U.S. cold air because of an absence of northwest flow. North America, or an absence of northwestern North America ridging. Sorry. I therefore go cool side of where I've been recently, assuming an eroding of the warm anomaly, but warmer than the mean. Huh. Okay. So, interesting that I like how he ties that in. How, there were, I guess, some cooler factors, but the fact that we didn't have maybe some of those blocking mechanisms or high latitude ridging mechanisms already in place, and he felt anyway, I guess, like, some of the cold air supply maybe not in place, that without those he um, uh, uh, didn't see the opportunity for cold. It is also possible, we've talked about this a lot, right, Dr. Decker, that eh, there's different interpretations of the MJO even, right? It's funny how, just based on different analytics, if you register it based on amplitude, if you're looking at some sort of MJO metric that's conditioned for maybe ENSO regime, time of year, depending on how you slice and dice, filter based on, time of year. Are you looking at, if it's December, January 5th or January 6th or whatever, are you looking at all dates within January, or are you looking at a centered mean, which could be much different, right? Because then you're going back to mid-December. And also just, do you have different predictive metrics, right? I know Paul has his own set of analytics, and, I think he has different sets of, I don't know, EOFs and things like that he uses to analyze the MGO regime and stuff like that. So it's hard to say though, right, without having him here to provide a little bit more interpretation.
Yeah, I was wondering, there's no way to really know the answer, but if something having to do with, the MJO analog is just on one point in time. Where was the MJO at a specific date? But not what was the trajectory, not what's the near-term forecast for the progression of the MJO, that kind of thing. So I wonder if that could have been critically important in this case, and not just where was the MJO on December, whatever.
Right. Let's look at that for now. I mean, we probably can't answer all those questions, but I'm just curious now that you mention it. Let's pull up the what information we do have about the MGO. So again, this was what did we say, December 15th, this forecast, right? So let's pull up some of our. By the way, I'm moving my the UI because that Zoom header always gets in the way, and then I have to, like, move it around a little bit. But all right, so when we were looking at this, so green is December. Here's the 13th up there, if you see my pointer. So the 15th is probably somewhere here, kind of getting. But of course, the way our analog tool works, if it's we made this forecast on December 15th, so it was utilizing information actually from the 13th, uh, because it tries to proxy a real-time situation, right? On the 15th, the Aussie website doesn't provide data for the 15th, so we really try to replicate what a real-time situation's like. So it's pulling data from the 13th and projecting that forward. On the 13th, the MJO phase 5 was certainly higher amplitude. And I know we want to look at progression too, but I'm just curious, going back to um, our MJO charts here. So December 20th or December 10th, somewhere around there, right? Yeah, I mean, you can see, I'm looking at the 16 to 28 period. Um, getting out there, and there's just kind of this one day, there's definitely a cool signal there, right? That that's consistent with what the value we're seeing. So there's no inconsistency there. Seemed like a weak to moderate cold signal based on these MJO plots, which is consistent with our analog tool, and it should be consistent because it's effectively pulling from the same data. But I think then, to Dr. Decker's point a little bit, when you start maybe breaking this down a little bit more, um, you know, uh, this did not turn out to be a very progressive MGO. And I definitely, I've done my own studies, and I think there's been other studies on this. I don't have them handy, but that do show that progressive MGOs, I think, behave more in a conical, like a canonical type MGO, that a stronger response. MGOs where you see this more erratic behavior, I think all things being equal, the temperature response is not as coherent. So it's it's possible that maybe Paul had some, and it's looking at the forecast. I don't have. I'm guessing, without digging too deep, I'm guessing the forecasts were also a little bit erratic, the dynamic forecast. So maybe the combination of Paul seeing the dynamic forecast and or maybe some of his own time progression, maybe MGO tools may have given him a hint that the MGO temperature response would not have been as strong. I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Decker?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, it's sort of, I imagine if we did the analog for just one day later, it would be a much less cold signal because it's rapidly moving into the circle of death there. So yeah, kind of, I guess maybe kind of unlucky that it happened to be that particular point right at the cold spot, but it didn't progress, like, right, exactly what you were saying. So yeah, I think this is definitely a case for having that two-dimensional, and not just like point in time, but some sort of progression aspect would be key. It certainly looks that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's definitely an idea for a future project. I know when we initially developed these phase plots, we did. You can see here progression filter no, so there's no filter for progression. It's just it allows for any and all events regardless of what happened. But when we originally designed these, we did. I think we did. I did have a set here with that had some sort of progression filter. Like I forget exactly what the methodology was, but there was something that basically said it had to have a certain amount of progression forward versus sort of the other case. And it would be interesting, maybe at some point we could come back to that. It would be interesting and helpful maybe to add those as another selection item in our menu here. So that's something to think about. Yeah, so these are good. Let's continue to talk about these things. And then, so just looking at the verification, the map verification here, this is how it looked. So, warm in key areas, right? What I was talking about, and since we're concerned about where basically population weightings or heating degree weightings, which are somewhat similar, we're always looking at some of these, eastern third of the country, Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Cincinnati, and a lot of these areas were warmer than normal. The only cold areas were sort of toward the Four Corners area. And we could look at some of the maps too. It might be interesting to look at some of the maps before we move on. Whoops. All right, here's this. So let's start with like a bad forecast like mine. Let's see what my map was showing. Yeah, you can see why that didn't work out, right? That's not one of those, oh darn, I was close. Yeah, I had above normal demand, below normal temperatures across the eastern third of the country, and clearly that did not work out. And let's just see what I was saying here. See if there's anything more. I don't think there was. Oh, interesting. So I said that, yeah, again, like I mentioned earlier, I was definitely putting some weight on the MGO input, and I think at the time there was some hints of a big East Coast storm, uh, or there was. That was right. That was, I guess that was right around the time when we had that big snowstorm, right? Way back. It seems like ages ago since we lost all that snow with the rains and stuff across the Northeast. But I guess I was using that as a factor that maybe that would 2 feet of snow across parts of the Northeast would slow down any kind of warm ups. But yeah, that did not work out well. Let's look at some of the better forecasts here. Matt Lanza, for example. Yeah, that's much better. Matt Lanza nails the warmth in the east. He nails the cold in the southwest. And of course, we don't distinguish between the Northern Rockies and the Southwest. So I'll give him that one, right? He definitely got the cold in the Southwest, warm in the East. I guess the Midwest, he had normal, but you can see that was a much better forecast. All right. Any other thoughts on this period? No. Okay. Everyone's still there. You're still there, Phil? Did I lose you?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the numbers right now.
See, Dr. Decker, I think you had pretty good forecast there. Philip, where were you on this list? Did I miss you? Or did you forecast?
I don't think I made a forecast
Okay.
for this period.
All right. Gotcha.
I wonder if we have a CFS map, though. I'm curious.
Oh yeah, it's funny because Dr. Decker's brought this up once or twice about how the CFS, and I looked at this, is actually performing better than the EC so far this winter, at least uh, in our set of metrics. So let's compare. Yeah, so let's pull up the EC. Let's do the surface too. Yeah, yeah. Okay, and let's get the EC. Okay, and let's get the EC surface, I guess. Oh, that wasn't bad.
Very different upper air, but very similar surface.
Yeah, let's look at the upper air first, I guess. And let's pull it up on Dynacast so we know what the Dynacast freeze on me here. Try to refresh. There we go. All right, so see if I can pull up the. It's very slow. Huh? Maybe it's having problems. Let's see. Anywhere else? Oh wait, there it is. All right, let's try it one more time here. So we want. What did I pull up? I guess I pulled up the global view, right? So let's do the global view. We want 500. Excuse me. And this is what, December 30th to January 3rd. And the year, I think you have to start with the start year. So that's 2020. Let's see what it looks like. There we go. All right. Yeah, so this makes sense, right? Big honking ridge in the eastern United States, trough up stretching across northwest Canada, off of Alaska, and then a lot of ridging up across Greenland over to Siberia, or northern Asia at least. All right, and now there's the EC, and I'll just kind of go back and forth just because it's a pain in the butt to come next to each other. It's funny, I don't know, eyeballing it, if I had to guess on the correlation, the spatial correlation, I actually like the EC a little bit better, right? Because
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It picked up on this stripe of blue up across, it just, it didn't obviously, and it even, I mean, it just didn't, obviously it was, I mean, the devil's in the details. The ridging across the eastern United States where we're forecasting was huge, was much bigger. And it missed that, right? It missed that dramatically. By by an order of magnitude, but from a global correlation, I think it might have actually done better. Any thoughts on this? Who would you give more votes for if you were voting in today's CFS EC election?
Can you pull up the verification again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, it looks like, this is a tough call.
doesn't look like either really captured the, I guess, I don't know if it was a cutoff low, but certainly those negative anomalies over the four corners in Mexico.
Yeah.
Well, there was. Doesn't seem like any of the models had that particular feature.
Yeah. Yeah. What about Europe? Looks like Europe had quite a. I'm just curious since we're looking at this. Did anyone? Oh, okay. The EC had definitely had a trough over Europe there. I guess they both did. Fair enough. They both did. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you you could make a case, Dr. Decker, that the CFS did a little bit better in seeing a weakness across Western states. On the other hand, again, across Canada and whatnot, it didn't really capture this. Let's see, the Pacific, really, from Eastern Asia, right, Northern Asia, Northeastern Asia, all the way across the Pacific, and then stretching across Northern Canada. There was a pretty significant troughing and a very extended jet, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, yeah. Um, and then looking at it from a temperature standpoint, let's just look at the temperatures real quick again. Let me get them side by side, or just so we can flip back and forth. Okay, EC, CFS, EC, CFS. Okay. I guess I don't know. I mean, other than I think one of the key takeaways, I guess, if I had, a few hours or a few weeks or whatever to investigate this period, I think Dr. Decker's point about the MJ is the one that is perhaps most interesting and most yeah, possible to show something. All right, switching gears, I guess. Let's look at today's forecasts. So I think I had it pulled up over here. Yeah. So I thought this, I was looking at this a little bit earlier, and it's definitely a range here again. I mean, if you include persistence, some of the persistence factors, you've got forecasts in the 120s, and then on the low end, MJO 5-year average 130s and 140s, Dr. Decker there, and then on the higher end, you've got Matt Rogers and Professor Lupo. Looks like at up around 170. So I thought it was interesting that there was some some pretty good spread on this forecast. Um, just looking at yeah, I guess who would like to? Well, listen, since I'm talking, I'll give my just quick 2 cents in terms of my number. You see me down here, 149. If you want to see my forecast map, that's my forecast map. So kind of warm to the south and east. I, uh, I, I guess I banked a little bit on the MGO again. I mean, I definitely did. Um, I did not like this, and you could tell there's some subjectivity here in terms of the words I'm using to describe my method here, and I think I admit to that fudge factor a little bit here. Um, I didn't like seeing the MJO, pulling back the MJO here. Where is it? There we go. It's probably a day old. Let me see. Yeah, I guess this is it. I just didn't like, looking at our MJO tool and just experientially, I feel really uncomfortable going for a cold kind of change to the forecast when the MGO. I know it's not strong, and I think Maxstar, when I read their report, I was reading their report actually when I made the forecast. I think they were talking a little bit about, hey, that the MGO is a little bit more incoherent, and I think that's why they have a cooler forecast than mine and stuff like that. I just, the bottom line is I just don't like seeing the MGO in that place. Here's the so what, we're around January 5th or January 10th. whichever one you want to use here. You know, we're somewhere out here, looking 16 to 20 days ahead. I was worried that we're just too early in trying to go to a colder pattern. So obviously the MGO forecast didn't work out in the verification, but I think overall still the season, I think it's been one of the more reliable signals. And just based on my experiential views and based on where the 15-day forecast was, which I think was still kind of normal or slightly above normal, I wanted to lean a little bit warm and fade those cooler signals, at least until we saw a little bit more progression of the MGO. So that was my 2 cents. Anyone have any questions about my methodology or forecast?
Makes sense. And I'll just note the CPC also noted the MJO. They said it was incoherent. And so that's why my spread is high. But they also talked about the sudden stratospheric warming. I think that may be ongoing as another source of uncertainty. So yeah, that's why my spread is a little bit above the climatological, sigma value there. But despite those uncertainties, they did go with that warm, slightly warm forecast. So pretty much in agreement with what you came up with, Dave.
Right. Misery loves company, right? So we'll see how it works out. No. All right. So let's see. Philip's on. So let's go to Philip in a second here. But Philip, before we do that, here, I'll show you. You can see. It would be interesting. Too bad Matt Rogers is on, but we have his view here. It definitely looks like he's seeing some of these utilizing some of the things that Dr. Darkish talked about, the stratospheric warming, some of the teleconnections there a little bit. Dave Darkangelo's up there, and then industry, yeah, 160, not as cold, but we've got this is the Maxar forecast, and like I mentioned, they talked a little bit about MGO. I guess same thing as CPC. MGO should not be maybe considered a significant warm signal, kind of removing that a little bit. And they also talk about that. Weak stratospheric vortex, negative AO. And by the way, you can see some of that. You guys probably know this, but they do have some analytics or model plots on the site where you can look at the stratosphere. So we can look at this here. I don't know which we want to look at, but millibar temperature departures. So there we go. If you want to just take a quick glance, definitely some warming there. And I'm curious what it looks like in the height department, if we see any kind of, too bad we don't have Professor Lang today. There's the interesting. I know there's a lot of folks have different interpretations, right, of how to use this or how to apply these stratospheric warmings, but in general, the rule of thumb, right, and the research suggests that after you get a sudden stratospheric warming, a major event, somewhere along the lines of 2 to 6 weeks, give or take, you tend to see the AO go negative, or correlates with the AO turning negative, and of course, the AO correlates with a negative AO correlates with colder temperatures. So let's pull up real quick, and then we're gonna go back to Philip, I promise. But let's just see what those teleconnections look like. I know some of these. Let's see here. So there's the AO, and this will dovetail into Philip's earlier question in a minute. So it's been negative, actually forecast to neutralize a little bit. NAO, there's the NAO. All right, the NAO has been more neutral, but shifted a little bit negative recently. And then the PNA, did the PNA stop working? Oh, no, there's PNA. A little bit positive there. And then one thing, last thing I promised, Philip, I just want to look at the strip, days. Let's just see this, and maybe the anomalies. So if we just look at, where's the forecast over the next 15 days? These are the HDDs, same things that we predict. They're just on a daily basis. You can see the date column on the left, so day 1 all the way out to day 15 or whatever. Yeah, and definitely on the warm side, right? Uh, for all these periods, every period, every one, when I say period, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, that's the GFS ensemble. Let's look at the EC. EC's, yeah, generally it's, normal to warmer than normal temperatures, or normal to below normal demand, or HDDs, right? The reds indicate warmer than normal. So pretty warm. And then let's just take a look at how that looks in terms of these. This is a couple days old. Let's look at the CFS maybe. Let's go to United States, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20. So again, I just, it always, everything I'm saying is more rule of thumb, and not based on, I don't have any specific thing, but I always get uncomfortable. It's just what I said, like, it's warmish, right? Basis normal for the next 15 days. And then we're projecting, some of that cold. The MJO support's not there. Maybe there's some other indicators. So it'll be interesting to see how this verifies. Obviously, there are some views, and there's teleconnections that definitely support those colder views. So let's hear what Philip has to say about this. Philip, you're a little bit colder than us. Where are you relative to the 30-year?
Yes.
You
A little colder.
You're a little bit colder. So yeah, tell us what you're thinking for this period.
All right. I do have to drop after this, so I will quickly do my forecast, and if there's anything additional, you can email or follow up on any further discussion about the teleconnections. Anyway, so just to give my quick 2-minute pitch. So essentially, as was already mentioned, I noted that the tropical convection looks pretty weakly active, and as of yesterday, the MJO was still in a null phase near phases 2 and 3. And I mentioned that the model suggests the signal will gradually propagate up to about phase 5, or maybe remain in the null phase. And as was also mentioned, the lag composites agreeing with the MJO analog with a pretty warm east and a cool west. So that's a warm pattern. And then the La Nina continues to be a warm signal for the southeast and a east, and a cold signal for the northern plains. So overall, I used my weighting for the tropics with a warm signal. And as was already mentioned, CPC is also a warm signal. And then the interesting one is the teleconnections, with the AO and NAO forecasting to be negative, with the PNA a little less certain, evolving to about neutral, and then the currently positive EPO has a rather uncertain evolution. So overall, I treated the teleconnections as a cold signal. I also bumped up my weighting for the teleconnections a little bit, which we'll see if that ends up being a good choice or not. The models are a little cooler than the 30-year, and they do have that strong Greenland block and also a ridge in the west. So overall, I did add a 2 fudge factor given the concerns for possibly colder conditions, and the lack of agreement leads to my lower confidence during this period. And for my pattern, as I mentioned, the La Nina and the negative NAO are my main pattern drivers. So I keep this warmth essentially in the southern tier of the country, and cold, highest confidence in the Midwest, and possibly spilling over into the Northeast, which overall averages to about normal for the East and about normal for the entire Rockies area.
Any questions for Philip? Philip, how much time did you say you have left?
I do have to drop basically now, so
Okay.
if there's further discussion, just email me and maybe CC Mike with a follow-up if there's any additional insight about the teleconnections and this surprising warmth.
I'll
or
just
maybe
say
not so surprising.
one quick thing about like the AO before you run. Again, I haven't looked at this in detail, but this is just based on past experience, I guess. We looked at the fact that the NAO recently was more neutral and the AO was negative.
Mhm.
you know, it's a global regime, or at least a hemispheric regime.
Yeah.
And we know the correlations aren't perfect. My guess would be that it lined up better for other areas, right? It just lined up better for cold in other areas. It didn't
Mhm.
have the support of the NAO. I guess historically, right, when it's linked more to the NAO, that's a more favorable, pure, kind of cold mechanism, sort of like what Paul Roundy was talking about for
Mhm.
the eastern and central United States. So that would be the first place I would look to say, are there even subsets of AO regimes, that might, project better for, the eastern and central United States?
Mhm. That makes sense.
But I'm not certain. I just figured I'd leave you with that. Maybe I think it could be interesting as something to look at, in the future. Again, looking at, different types of AO regimes. I'm sure someone's looked at that, but I don't know. Okay, well, if you have to leave, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
All right. See ya.
All right. Let's see. Sean, did you have a forecast this period?
I submitted it, I think, just like a minute or two late.
Oh,
So it's the following week, but it was a little rushed. I didn't put much detail in the description. But yeah, I mean, from looking at it, it is difficult to get like a good read. Pretty much similar to what everyone's saying with the MJO, not giving a good detail, and then with the breaking of the polar vortex. I'm not very familiar on how to read that. I guess if it was Europe, I would just go colder in general for all of it. But with the US, I'm not sure how that stratospheric interaction will affect 2 weeks from now. So I was a little conflicted on whether to go cold or warm with this. So I kind of just split the difference, and I relied mainly on the 500 millibar level blocking. Um, and Yeah, I kind of kept with consistent La Nina patterns. But I think I mean, my gut feeling is that it's going to get cold. I would have typically picked a higher HDD, um, but I was trying not to go with my gut.
so your gut is cold.
My gut is cold because I think the southern stratospheric warming is going to have a cooling effect for the continental US 2 weeks from now. But I don't know. It's a hard thing to read. I haven't found anything conclusive as to um, what a split in the polar vortex that we're seeing right now translates to. So if you go to the 10 millibar level or the 10 HP, okay,
Yep.
It's sitting over Siberia almost, right? I guess.
Yeah, you can see a trough over here. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So isn't this like an indication that it's splitting, basically?
Uh,
Maybe I'm reading into it too much.
yeah, I mean, so I'm not an expert on stratospheric research, but what I think that, there's different flavors, right? There's like a sudden major warmings, minor warmings. In general, I think the research is the bigger, the stronger, more intense the warming, the more likely it's going to have an impact on the troposphere, the general rule. And you're right that there's general within, let's say even a major warming, or maybe they're associated with major and minor, but there's I think it's sometimes called disruptions, where the vortex is disrupted. So in other words, normally it might be closer to the pole, right, centered over the pole, and then you get some sort of perturbation, some sort of warming, and as you pointed out, it's pushed, it's disrupted, and when that happens, that is, that there's some impact there, and along with other metrics, it might be qualified as a minor or major warming. And then the more severe situations are when it's split, and you might have a piece of the vortex that's here, like you said, like maybe over Asia, and another piece of the vortex that comes across North America or the United States into the United States in severe cases, and then eventually, it the situation kind of retracts and it coalesces and back over the pole again. So I don't know. That was a long-winded way of me saying that I don't know yet if this would qualify as a split or if it's a significant disruption. Clearly, it's disrupted. There's no question about that. The fact that it's moved off of the pole and it's disrupted, whether it's a full split or not, I'm not certain. Dr. Decker, do you know?
I'm not too familiar, so I can't add too much.
Cool. Dr. Lang, who was with us a few weeks ago now, she's a great source for that. So I mean, I'm sure she would be if you wanted to, try to send her an email or post something on Twitter or something like that. She may even be posting more information right now. If you go to her Twitter feed, she's a great resource for that. And on her website, or in her, I think her and some of her students have some really good websites, and you can find some of the information that might talk about that.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I didn't think about that. I was thinking about her when she was on. I guess it was 2-3 weeks. I forget how long ago. But I was looking at it at that time as well, and it looked like it was. I don't know. I'm almost because I've been trying to forecast it, and I've been looking at improving the forecastability of something like that. So I'm kind of hoping for it because in my mind I already decided that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But I was looking at it a couple weeks ago, and it looked like it's been following similar patterns of previous years where it has split and caused disruption.
Yeah.
But I mean, it keeps edging that direction too.
Right.
At least from what I've been seeing.
But
yeah.
And definitely, just based on what it's seeing, and there's some other neat charts too, where you can look at the 10 millibar temperature, like time series and stuff. And I definitely it definitely seems like it's moving in that direction, at least that it will continue to support and perhaps increase the intensity of the negative AO, right? And I think so. Everything you said, I think you hinted at this. The correlation with Europe is a little bit stronger. So all things being equal, you probably be a little bit more confident about forecasting cold in Europe than United States. But there's still, we know, right? I forget exactly what it is in January, but there's a significant correlation, right? So, and I think and of course, I think, I think what operational Mets also try to piece together is how well the dynamic guidance resolve these kinds of things. And I think there's a belief that the models don't resolve them that well. And that speaks to maybe your view and Matt Rogers' view on this forecast leaning colder, because if the models really aren't resolving the full effects or impacts, then maybe what we will see is a much bigger impact across the United States 2, 3, 4 weeks from now than what the guidance is showing now. So, that's interesting what you're saying. And by the way, to your split point, I'm just looking at the EC ensemble now. This is EC ensemble at 50 millibars, but there's definitely a little bit more of a hint of a split here. I don't know the technical exact definition or what the pattern configure, schematics, whatever, but just eyeballing it, right? You can see a vortex here over Asia, and it seems like there's a piece that wants to split across Eastern North America. And I know this is where it gets into more rules of thumb, and you just have to talk to different forecasters and make your own mind or do your own research. But I know the Risk Pulse group, who we have as guests occasionally, they like to look at not just if it's a warming or not. Like, okay, the stratosphere is warm, there's a warming, but where the vortex, whether in particular, I guess a split, but certainly the vortex itself, where it's located, because they believe that it typically tracks where the cold at the surface is going to be. So in other words, if the vortex, like I guess more in this situation, especially with the GFS ensemble, is more toward Asia, well, then maybe the cold's going to be locked over that area, and we're going to be warm here in eastern United States and North America because you have the big upper level ridging. But if and when the vortex relocates or splits or comes across and sneaks back into eastern North America, then that would be an ideal situation for cold. So again, I don't bring that up to advocate that that's right or wrong, but that there's some interesting views in terms of not just whether you have a stratospheric warming, but where that vortex is located.
All right.
Okay. Let's see. What else? So I know, I mean, we have a few more minutes. The only other issue I think we didn't discuss was, hey, we know we're in a pretty significant La Nina base state, right? Or SST state anyway, moderate to strong, right? Depending on, I don't know the exact criteria, but at least in the moderate category, right? Maybe in the strong category, depending on the whatever threshold you use. Atmospherically, are we seeing the kind of response? And I think some of the answers I've seen thus far are more to the no end. And one of the, like, for example, one of the reasons, like, or how you might analyze that is the PNA, for example, right? I think in the PNA is typically negative in La Nina regimes, all things being equal, right? Because in La Nina regimes, you expect more of the troughing in the west and central North America and kind of ridging in the southeast United States, at least across North America. And you can look at it here, right? Since mid or late November, we've been in generally a positive PNA regime. So I haven't studied this a lot, so I'm going to stop right there and just say, does anyone else has it? Not that anyone's investigated this in detail, but has anyone else heard anything around the grapevine or looked into this in terms of, how much coupling there is between the SSTs and the atmosphere globally, and also, I guess, in terms of regardless of where we've been, the expectations through the end of the month and into February?
I haven't looked at that specifically, but I just think it's interesting that looking at the 7-day forecasts time series there, the actual PNA has been pretty much at the positive, the upper end of the bound of the range consistently for the last 2.5 months or so.
Yeah.
Especially at 7-day, but even the other lead times as well. But so it seems to be indicating that something interesting is going on, kind of against. At least the model climate wants to go more neutral than is actually happening. And I don't know if it has anything to do with La Nina or maybe the model overdoing La Nina or something, but I just find it interesting that consistently, especially 7-day, but really all of them, the actual PNA since mid-November has been above the ensemble mean most of the time, and even above the range sometimes as well.
Yeah, and you certainly see that. Yeah, and it may be a little bit more pronounced in the 14-day, right? Since about mid-November, almost without exception, that one period for a couple days, it's been on the positive end. So that's interesting, and that's sort of a related, but almost also a different point in the fact that the models. Why have the models been um, uh, not picking up on the more positive PNA. Um, but yeah, I guess it's a bigger question for a bigger time. Maybe over the next couple of weeks, especially if we have some guests from industry, we can ask them about this. I'll just throw out my own 2 cents. We know, and some of this is just qualitative/subjective, but in my experience, right, you go through months, even in La Nina years and even in winters, where you see La Nina or El Nino have a big influence, that when you break it down on a month level, or of course on a week level, but where you see a month that doesn't behave as you like a canonical type response. So I would be, regardless, this is just my 2 cents, but regardless of what's happened so far, I don't think it necessarily, unless we have some information that says so, that hey, we there hasn't been good coupling for the past month, so I would be careful about suggesting that there won't be coupling for the next couple months. Again, unless there's something specific that we know is going to uh, oppose that. But of course, from an SST standpoint, the SSTs are, I think, just as cold as ever, if not colder. So the SSTs are there. I guess the open question is, again, will we see the atmosphere couple, or will we continue in this sort of uncoupled environment? And if so, why is that? Why is the atmosphere having difficulty or not coupling anyway with the SSTs? And how unusual is this? And again, I gave my sort of qualitative that I don't think it's that unusual to see like a month, but if we go 2 and 3 months, I suspect that would be to have a moderate strong La Nina and to have PNA for most of the season. I suspect that would be unusual. I don't know, Sean. It seems like you've been kind of thinking about some of these research questions lately. Any before we part ways here, anything on your mind in terms of the La Nina state or anything else?
No, not so much. It operates independently though of the AO, right? And the NAO.
Yeah. I don't think so exactly. So I know there's research, and I've done some of this, that shows that from a global standpoint, La Ninas tend to be correlated, or are correlated with more positive NAO AO regimes, and vice versa, El Nino with more negative. So I do think there's a global, because in La Ninas you tend to see more zonal mid-latitude ridges, Southeast United States, Eastern Pacific, and then I think, as you go across mid-latitude, there just tends to be more mid-latitude ridging and then high-latitude troughing. So I think it is a global, it literally is a global phenomenon. I'm sure it has a greater response closer to the equator, or I'm not sure, but I think it probably does. So, that's interesting too. And I see where you're going with that. I mean, even looking at the AO, I would think the PNA, again, everything I'm saying, I would definitely check it before you go with it. I would think that the La Nina has a stronger signal on a monthly seasonal basis with the PNA than it does the AO, but I do think it has. And of course, as we've already talked about, the AO has been negative too so far, and that hasn't necessarily been, I believe, consistent with La Nina.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at with that.
We could see real quick. Do we have anything? Usually you can find something. They have some schematics here we can maybe look at real quick. Historical, where is it? Fact sheet, educational. Is this it? Probably one of these guys. Oh, El Nino impacts. Let's look at this one. Warm episodes, warm and cold episodes. Well, let's just click on it. That's not what I want. All right, that's warm. Let's go to the one above it. Is this one? Typical U.S. impacts. Jeez. Oh, there we go. This is just one, but this is not a great one, but this is an old one. So you can see how in La Nina you typically get more ridging in the East Pacific here, ridging in the Southeast, and then you get this cold up across Western and Central Canada, and that cold tends to leak into the northern United States, and it tends to be warm in the Southeast United States. And you could see how that's kind of reversed here. Now, it doesn't show the Arctic too much. We were talking about the AO. This really doesn't talk, but it does show you that, you do tend to get these ridges, stronger ridging down, in the mid latitudes here. And again, I think that's why, in part, the stronger jet across the mid latitude here, that you tend to get a little bit more, as a general rule, troughing up across the Arctic, less episodes of negative AO. But I would say let's, to be continued, right? Let's, we're just getting into the heart of this winter. Let's continue to talk about this over the next few weeks. How's that sound, Sean?
Sounds great.
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks everyone. And we'll see you again next week. Take care, guys.
Bye, guys.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.